Redditors who have proposed been proposed to, and the answer was no. Why and how awkward was it? When I was 16, I dated a guy who was 18. We weren't serious or anything, just fun group type dates. One night, completely out of the blue, he proposed. I was so shocked I just blurted out, "Number." Then he spent the rest of the date trying to convince me. I told him I was way too young to even think about that. Next day, a friend says, "Hey, did you hear guys getting married for about 10 seconds? I'm completely confused." I know I said no. I said no over and over again. Then friend says, "Yeah, he's marrying some random girl I didn't even know." Turns out, I was his public girlfriend. She was his private girlfriend. As far as I can figure, after I turned him down, he went to ask her. Dodge a bullet with that one. At least you were his first choice, I guess. My mom said no to my dad twice, and the third time was just like, frick it. He's persistent, I'll give him that. What do I have to lose? Had 2 kids and then divorced, and now she hates him and he's secretly still in love with her. It's freaking weird. My dad is only just getting over my mom now, over 20 years after they split. First, a disclaimer. While this didn't happen to me, I was involved in it. I'd been dating this girl, who'd later be my wife, for about a year. During that time, she'd been in touch with a friend, an ex. I didn't really worry. I mean, I was comfortable in our relationship, and we were honest with each other, so when she told me that the guy was just a friend, kind of weird, but okay, I took her at it. We were out at a park in her hometown one afternoon. I was taking bad photography, because I haven't an artistic bone in my body, and we decided it was time to finish. We walked back to my car, and there was this guy. I knew who it was from her photos, but I was like, hey. So she's like, oh hey, what's up? Dude decides to go for the gold, drops down on one knee, and asks her to marry him, while she's out on a date with a different guy that she'd been seeing for over a year. Note, she thinks this guy is her friend, and not even a friend zone friend, just a dude. They had dated 3 years previous for like 2 weeks before she broke it off. She looks at me, then looks at him and goes, "You're not serious, are you?" He gets up, looks at me and gives me a look. I was in better shape back then, 2005, and at least 6 inches taller than dude. He was kind of squat, kind of mushy, which is fine, but remember, pick your battles. He takes a swing. I step back out of the way. He rushes me. I move out of the way. He goes running across the parking lot to his car, peels out, and that's the end of it. Or so I thought. The next day, I get a visit from the police. Apparently, I was in a fight with this guy and beat the crap out of him, and he believes that, for her best interest, there should be a restraining order against me on her behalf. I ask the police if this is legal. They say no, but he can get a restraining order. I tell them I didn't touch the guy, and they show me a picture. Dude is beat to heck. So I have to give a statement. I tell them what happened. They look at me, take a snapshot of my lily white non-damaged hands. If you beat someone down, you'll get bruises on your knuckles, and go on their way. Dude gets in trouble for filing a false claim, as the GF tells them the exact story I did. 2 years later, I did the one knee thing. A year after that, we were married. Fun times. It was my sophomore year of high school. We had been dating for 2 months. He legitimately asked his mother for his grandmother's wedding ring, and she agreed to give it to him so he could propose. Beautiful ring. Crazy family. Perhaps they didn't like you and this was their crafty way of scaring you off. Effective. Her dad called me months later and said, "No, you can't marry my daughter, and don't ever speak to any of us again." Mind you, these people were like family to me for a while, or so I thought. She went along with it, so I guess he did me a favor in the long run. Now married to someone who has parents that actually like me, so that's cool. My ex contacted me via text a couple of days after Thanksgiving, asking me if we could get married and run away together. When I told him that was a little strange, he lost his mind, accusing me of judging him, and that is why I said no. That is also what made it incredibly awkward. She just wanted a green card. I didn't love her. I did not want to commit a felony. I was too young, and I worried about how much a divorce would cost me. It was awkward until I walked away and never spoke to her again. Afterwards it was a lot less awkward. I met this guy at my university. We dated for under a year. He already had a degree and was pursuing another one because his first one didn't allow him to get a job. After 2 semesters, he found out he couldn't pursue that degree anymore. His financial aid ran out. He used too much of it and he'd either have to pay his tuition out of pocket or pay off his debt. I offered the idea of going into the military to help with his debt and education. To set the mood, please picture a crowded pizza place in the afternoon. The man is in front of me, not on his knee. He doesn't have a ring, and I paid for our pizza. So after I told him about going into the military, he jokingly stated yeah, and then we could get married. On many occasions, he told me he never wanted to get married. So that, plus the whole scene, I thought he was joking. So I said no. I felt like it would be weirder to say yes to a fake proposal, like a super crazy thirsty bee wanting to get married. Yeah, turns out he wasn't kidding at all. Thank God his mom is so nosy, otherwise I wouldn't have known how he really felt. He's my husband now. I didn't get a no exactly. She said, "You're crazy. 20 years old, dating just a couple months." I said yes. "But will you marry me anyway?" She still thought I was crazy, but married me soon after. 38 years and counting. I said no to her. She was nice but I had never met her. It was just as weird for her. We were both 18 at the time. Say no to arranged marriage. Glad my parents chilled out after that. Just saying, good for you. Right fricking on. You decide who you marry, nobody else. Not really a proposal, and not really a number. I was with my girlfriend at the time for 6 years. So I decided I should propose. We'd both talked about marriage and both agreed that we'd want to get married, and we loved each other. I had sappy romantic plans. I had a ring picked out. All I needed was her ring size. So I had my mother oh so discreetly ask for her ring size in a text message, claiming it was because she was getting a ring for a gift for her. Well, she caught on and figured I was going to propose. So she promptly drove to my house and broke up with me on the spot. I still don't quite know why. Haven't spoken to her since. But a lot of time has passed. I'm glad she turned me down because I'm happily engaged now and getting married this year. My ex asked me to marry him. We weren't together at the time. At work though I am, so he would have someone to write home to when he left for the military. I said no because that's stupid and he had been seeing his ex while seeing me. He left soon after and we never spoke again. I caught my then boyfriend talking to another girl online and confronted him. To prove his love he asked me to marry him, to which I replied, "Next time you propose to a girl you better be on one knee, have a ring in your hand, and you sure as heck need to pronounce her last name right." He then attempted suicide and I wrestled the gun out of his hand. Fun times. That escalated quickly. I said no because you don't get engaged to convince yourselves you have a stable relationship that will make it for the long haul. You get engaged because you're already convinced you will. A ring is not a magical relationship band-aid. I said no. We'd been together for 2 weeks. Sure, everything was going great, but it had been 2 weeks. For extra points, I already had a very public broken engagement, and they knew I had baggage. I should have taken it for the red flag it was and split up with him then, instead of 2 awful years later. My sister's ex's little sister got proposed to after 2 weeks. Oh, she was 19. Her family told her to say yes, so she did. I can't imagine that it could have ended well. If you barely know a guy, and aren't even sure and just do it because your family tells you to. My high school college sweetheart proposed to me when I found out I was pregnant. He was only asking me because I was pregnant, and because his family was pressuring him into it. We'd been together 8 years in total, so I should have said yes. But when he actually asked, I just didn't want to. The actual proposal itself was in the front seat of his pickup truck during my lunch break at work. We'd just gotten Wendy's and were sitting in the parking lot. I was looking at my phone because I was worried about the time. I only had a half hour for lunch. When he asked, The proposal was something like, so, we can get married, you know, if you want. He then handed me a ring his mom had obviously picked out, still in bag from the jewelry store. I said no, we finished our food, and I went back to work. I didn't even tell anyone what happened because it was so not a big deal. In terms of our actual relationship, it didn't change anything, mostly because he didn't want to marry me any more than I wanted to marry him. We broke up a year later for unrelated reasons. He wanted to party more than be a dad. I'd been seeing my GF for about 2 years. My band was playing a gig, a kinda outdoor mini festival with a couple of bands on. Halfway through the set, my very drunk GF jumps on the stage mid-song and grabs the mic. I stop playing. The rest of the band carries on for a few moments. It's horribly uncomfortable. When they stop, my GF slurs out a proposal. No ring, no getting down on one knee, just a spur of the moment drunken proposal in front of a few hundred people. So being on the spot, I said yes, kissed her and booted her off the stage and finished my set. The rest of the evening she was so happy, all over me, loving life and patting herself on the back for having the initiative and being a 21st century woman, blah blah blah. In the morning I told her it wasn't happening and I only said yes because I didn't want to crush her in front of all our friends and several strangers. She was upset but admitted that it was kinda a crappy situation to put me in. 5 years later I popped the question to her, sober, in private. She said yes. And then the next morning psyched me out and got her revenge by saying I only said yes cause I didn't want to crush you in front of all our furniture. She was joking. After I broke up with my ex, I was devastated and went on a solo trip to another city, 8-ish hours away. I met up with some friends and an acquaintance of mine started taking more interest in me. At some point, I told him that I wasn't interested. He told me he wasn't interested in me but that he wanted some support company because his cancer returned. He was a cancer survivor, so I felt really horrible about the whole thing and being judgmental. To make up for it, I met him as much as I could. Even after I returned, I answered his depressing phone calls, talked to him every night, texted him all day, etc. while trying to get over my ex. One day, just out of the blue, he seemed a little off. He accused me of hurting him, which he has done in the past, and then said he was going to binge drink, which he wasn't supposed to do because of all the medication he was supposed to be taking. I told him to go home and go to sleep, but it ended up being a long night. He drove 8+ hours, intoxicated that night to come see me. I was anxious and so frustrated, but he said that he lied about not being romantically interested in me and wanted me to be his girlfriend. I told him that I was still hurting and somehow that made him happy. He kept proposing from that day onwards and played the cancer card, depression card, suicide card to make me do what he wanted. I wasn't thinking straight because I had just broken up and was having second thoughts, but this sent me into an anxiety-ridden depression, and within the 4 weeks I started hanging out with him. I was hospitalized twice for severe anxiety attacks. Turns out, he had ASPD, lied about everything including the cancer, depression, suicidal thoughts, but still wanted to marry me. He enjoyed watching me suffer and cringe when I tolerated him. For some weird reason, I almost agreed until I confessed what was going on to the nurse on duty and he set me straight. The nurse is now one of my good friends. My ex-flatmate tells me that our old address still gets letters, proposal rings, gifts from the guy, but sometimes they get bad things. Pictures of his dead dog, he killed his pet, or other dead animals, or tapes of him seemingly abusing random women. It's been a year since that happened, but yeah, not awkward, just scary. I once asked my other half if she wanted an engagement ring or a dishwasher for her birthday. She chose the dishwasher. Now I'm imagining you sitting on one knee with a dishwasher next to you asking her to marry you. A sort of proposal? I guess he was testing the waters. First serious boyfriend. I was 15 or 16 and he was 17. He said he would like to marry me when I turned 18. Since I would legally be able to marry him and out of high school, I told him I'm not sure if I'd want to marry him when I was 18. If we were still together by then, I might be going to university or traveling. He was pretty upset by this. We were in love, right? Then he brought up getting me a promise ring. I had no idea what a promise ring was and asked him to explain. Queefologist. WTF is a promise ring? BF. It's a promise to get married. Queefologist. Isn't that an engagement ring? BF. Well, it's a promise that I'll ask you to marry me. Queefologist. That's stupid. If you want to marry someone you should just ask them. Insert awkward silence here. He then tried to explain how we could get engaged when I turned 18 and not get married for years if that's what I wanted. He was essentially trying to convince me to marry him when I was 15. He ended up marrying the girl he dated right after me. I proposed to my then boyfriend, now husband. He said no, not because he didn't want to marry me or wasn't ready, but because he'd already planned my proposal and had started doing stuff for it. I was sad until he'd finished explaining, and then we both carried on with our holiday more excited than we already were. I dated my high school sweetheart through the first year of college. All through our relationship, he went on and on about how he didn't believe in marriage and would never get married. Whatever. We were teenagers. We broke up at the end of freshman year. But we tried to stay friends because I was too young to realize he was just trying to get me back. He brings up marriage and says I would have married you. You know, I just said okay. He gets irritated and says well expectantly. I replied with clearly, since I broke up with you, I would not have married you. It wasn't until later that I realized, but I'm pretty sure he was asking in some crazy attempt to get back together. He stalked me for another year before I exploded at him. Definitely awkward. I forget how long we had been together at this point. We were still 17 at the time, and she messages me something in Elvish over Facebook. She knew I like LOTR. So I translated because it looked unfamiliar and it said, will you marry me? I was like, aren't we a little young? I'm not ready for that, but we didn't break up until about a year or so later. If you thought that was weird, she said I love you after a week and a half of being together. I'm not gonna lie, I used to think people were obviously immature and nuts for saying I love you so soon. But my husband and I said it after a few weeks. It just worked for us. I'd been dating a guy for going on 2 years, 17-19. Lived with him for basically all of it because my mother moved and I didn't want to change schools senior year. At a year and something I discovered he'd been cheating on me for something like 5 months because he'd mentioned to his super skank ex-prostitute co-worker that I didn't like anal and refused to do it. So her being the loving, sympathetic person she was, she offered to do it for him. I didn't leave him when I found out. Stayed for about 2 months trying to force myself to forgive him but during that time I couldn't. He'd spent a majority of our relationship being abusive, also murdered my dog and hid it from me. So this was the icing of the crap cake. I left him and stayed over at a friend's. The next morning he shows up with my journal. He'd written some long-winded 3-page apology in it. The last line was, so will you marry me? I laughed a lot and said something like, are you freaking kidding me? I'd never marry you, and went back into my friend's house. Hello friendo, you have been visited by the cozy papas of lazy Sundays. Upvote now or you may never have a good relax ever again. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.